In the bright winter hush of Apostle Bay, a retired Navy SEAL found a wounded German shepherd sleeping on the porch of a forgotten marina hall. She was thin, scarred, and silent, but she guarded those old doors like something precious still lived inside. Russell Dane had spent years avoiding music, memories, and the room where his late wife once sang. But Echo would not leave the hall, and she would not let him walk away from it either. Behind the dusty stage, an old piano and a stack of forgotten records began to reveal why this place mattered. What looked like an empty building was really a shelter for lonely hearts waiting to be remembered. Tell us where you're watching from, share your thoughts after the story, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories alive. Winter came to Apostle Bay, Wisconsin, not like an army, but like a quiet choir in white robes. It softened the rooftops first, then the railings, then the sleeping boats in the marina, until every hull looked as if it had been tucked away by a careful hand. The lake stretched beyond the docks in a sheet of pale ice, silver beneath the early sun. Masts clicked gently in the wind. Yellow lamps glowed along the boardwalk, small and stubborn against the cold, like candles set before an old altar. Russell Dane had always liked that kind of silence. At 50, he moved through the marina as if he had been carved from the same weathered timber as the docks. He stood a little over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and solid, with the compact strength of a man who had carried too much gear through too many hard places and learned never to waste motion. His face was long and lined, with high cheekbones, a nose that had once been broken and never perfectly reset, and gray-blue eyes that seemed to notice everything while asking for nothing. His dark ash-brown hair was cut short, though no longer with strict military sharpness. Silver had begun to gather at his temples. A few days of trimmed stubble shadowed his jaw, giving him the look of a man who still kept discipline, but no longer reported to anyone. Most mornings, Russell wore the same olive-drab combat shirt he had kept from another life. The body of it fit close, practical and faded, while the camouflage sleeves bore horizontal bands around the upper arms. It was not a costume to him. It was simply durable, familiar, and hard to ruin with oil. Over it, he pulled on a waxed canvas jacket the color of wet bark, work pants darkened at the knees, and brown boots heavy enough to argue with ice. He had once been a Navy SEAL. People in Apostle Bay knew that much, though Russell never decorated the fact with stories. He had served in coastal operations, on black water and narrow channels, around fast boats, dive equipment, generators, radios, and nights where the sea looked less like water than an open mouth. He understood engines because he had depended on them when failure could mean death. He understood silence because sometimes silence had saved him. Now he fixed marina motors in winter, outboards, small diesels, frozen bilge pumps, old generators that coughed like stubborn men. Machines suited him. They did not ask why his hand sometimes stopped over a loose wire as if remembering another wire, another sound, another place. They did not ask why he avoided crowded rooms, holiday dinners, or any building where someone might begin to sing. That was why he avoided Harbor Light Hall. The old hall sat at the far end of the marina, beyond the bait shop and the shuttered summer cafe, where the boardwalk widened near the water. It had white clapboard walls, green trim faded by lake wind, and a small wooden sign with a painted lantern nearly worn away. Years ago, before Russell came to Apostle Bay, Harbor Light Hall had been the warmest room in town during winter. Dock workers had eaten soup there after long shifts. Widows had come in for coffee and left with someone to sit beside. Retired men who pretended they were fine had found excuses to stack chairs, wash bowls, or sing badly in the back row. There had been a winter choir, too, nothing grand. Just ordinary people lifting ordinary voices into the cold and discovering, sometimes by accident, that they still belonged somewhere. Marin had loved that room. Russell's wife had once sung there on Thursday nights, her voice clear and low, the kind that did not demand attention but made people stop pretending they were not listening. She had worn a blue scarf on stage. She had laughed whenever Russell fussed with cables and complained about cheap microphones. "You can command a boat in bad weather," she used to tease him, "but one squeaky speaker defeats you?" "Speakers don't follow orders," he would say. "Neither do singers." He had not stepped inside Harbor Light Hall since the winter after she died. A patch of black ice on a county road. A truck that slid through a turn. A phone call before dawn. That was how the music stopped. Not dramatically. Not with thunder. Just a voice on the line, and then a world with all its sound removed. So Russell fixed engines. He kept his house neat and quiet. He answered questions in short sentences. He let the years pass over him like snow over a covered boat. Then, on a bright freezing morning in January, he found the dog. He was crossing the marina yard with a toolbox in one hand and a paper cup of coffee in the other, when he noticed a dark shape on the porch of Harbor Light Hall. At first he thought it was a bundled tarp blown from the side shed. The snow had drifted high against the steps, and the shape barely moved. Then it lifted its head. Russell stopped. A German shepherd lay pressed against the front doors of the hall. She was black and tan, or had been once. Snow clung to her coat in hard white patches. Her ribs showed beneath the fur along her sides. One ear stood upright, while the other, torn slightly at the tip, leaned at an imperfect angle that gave her face a strange, wounded dignity. Old scars marked her legs. Around her neck the fur was worn in a pale ring, as if a collar or rope had lived there too long. She did not bark. She did not growl. She only watched him with amber eyes darkened by hunger and suspicion. Russell set the toolbox down slowly. "Easy," he said, though his voice sounded too loud in the morning cold. The dog's eyes flicked toward his mouth, then back to his hands. She did not retreat from the door. If anything, she seemed to press closer to it, as if her thin body were the final lock keeping the hall from harm. Russell had seen that posture before, though not in a marina dog. It was the posture of a creature with nothing left but duty. He looked at the empty boardwalk, then at the hall. No footprints except his own, and the dog's faint, wandering tracks, half filled by fresh snow. No bowl, no blanket, no owner calling from the street. "Of course," he muttered, "because one frozen engine wasn't enough for today." The dog blinked. It was not quite funny, but in the cold, with his coffee cooling in his hand and a half-starved shepherd guarding a closed music hall like some shaggy queen of ruins, Russell almost smiled. Almost. He went back to his workshop and returned with a tin bowl, leftover roast beef from his refrigerator, and a wool blanket he had kept in the truck for emergencies. He placed the bowl at the bottom of the steps and backed away. The shepherd did not move. Russell backed farther, stopping near a dock post. Only then did she rise. It hurt to watch. Her legs trembled beneath her. She descended one step, then paused, eyes still locked on him. Another step. Another pause. She reached the bowl, sniffed once, and began to eat with controlled urgency. Not wild, not greedy, but as if she had learned that food could disappear if one trusted too quickly. Russell stood still, letting the wind worry at his jacket. When the bowl was empty, the dog lifted her head. A small strip of beef clung to the side of her muzzle. She did not lick it away immediately. She simply looked at him as though deciding whether he was part of the danger or part of the weather. Then a door creaked behind the hall. Russell turned sharply. An elderly woman stepped from the narrow side entrance, wrapped in a cream wool coat and a plum-colored scarf. Her silver-black hair was tucked beneath a knitted hat, and though her shoulders were slim, she carried herself with the fading elegance of someone who had once owned a stage without needing to announce it. Her eyes were warm brown, bright despite the cold. "Don't worry," she said. "She won't bite unless your soul is overdue for inspection." Russell stared at her. "Gloria Hensley," she added, as if his silence were an invitation, "and you must be Russell Dane." The man who can fix every motor in Apostle Bay and almost every conversation by leaving it. I wasn't aware conversations needed repair. Most don't. They need mercy. The shepherd looked toward Gloria and gave the smallest movement of her tail. Russell noticed. "You know this dog?" Gloria's face softened. "Her name is Echo." The name settled strangely in the air. Echo. A sound returning after it should have disappeared. "She yours?" Russell asked. "No," Gloria said. "Not exactly. Neil Barlow used to call her that. He was the caretaker here before he passed." She looked toward the hall, and for a moment her humor dimmed. "He said she started coming around 2 winters ago. Wouldn't let anyone touch her at first, but Neil had patience. And soup bones. A holy combination, if you ask me." Russell glanced at the shepherd. "She's in bad shape." "I know. Someone should have called animal control." Gloria gave him a look that was gentle, but not soft. Someone should have done many things in this town. The wind moved between them, carrying loose snow from the roof in a glittering veil. Harbor Light Hall groaned faintly, old wood shifting in the cold. The dog, Echo, turned at the sound and moved back toward the porch. She climbed the steps with effort and lay down again in front of the double doors, guarding them. Russell looked at Gloria. "Why is she here?" "Because this was the first place that treated her like she mattered." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one she gave me." Gloria stepped closer to the porch, but Echo shifted, placing her body between the old woman and the closed doors. Not threatening, not blocking Gloria from entering, exactly. More like reminding the world that passage into this place required permission from the wounded. Russell felt something tighten behind his ribs. He had known men like that. Not good men, not bad men. Just men who, after everything had burned down, kept watch over ashes because ashes were all they had left to protect. Gloria saw him watching. "Neil died in October," she said quietly. "After that, she kept coming back. I leave food when I can, but she won't follow me home, and she won't stay anywhere else. Every time the snow gets bad, I think she'll finally give up." Echo lowered her head onto her paws. Her amber eyes remained open. "She doesn't," Gloria finished. Russell wanted to say this was not his problem. He had an engine waiting in Bay 3, 2 cracked fuel lines to replace, and a life carefully built around not entering old rooms full of old songs. He wanted to pick up his toolbox, nod once, and leave Gloria Hensley, Echo, and Harbor Light Hall to whatever quiet tragedy they had chosen together. Instead, his gaze drifted to the painted lantern above the doors. The paint had peeled almost completely from one side. Snow gathered along the frame. Beneath it, faintly visible through frost on the glass, he could see the shadow of the old lobby. And beyond that, only darkness. Marin had once stood under that sign, with her blue scarf wrapped around her throat, laughing because the choir had come in 2 beats late and somehow made the song better. Russell swallowed. Echo rose again, slowly this time. She came down 1 step and stopped between Gloria and the cold boardwalk. Her body trembled, her ribs showed. A scar crossed one front leg, yet she held herself with the grave authority of a sentry at the gate of a fallen kingdom. Not a military dog, not a trained protector, just a creature who remembered warmth and had decided warmth was worth defending. Russell bent, picked up the empty bowl, and felt the absurd weight of it in his hand. A bowl was not a promise. A blanket was not a rescue. A man could feed a dog and still walk away. He knew that. Maybe Echo knew it too. Her eyes remained on him, not pleading, not trusting, not yet. Only waiting. Gloria pulled her scarf tighter and glanced toward the hall. "I still have a key," she said. "For emergencies." Russell looked at her. "Is this an emergency?" The old singer's smile was small and sad. "Around here, Mr. Dane, loneliness usually is. We just wait too long to call it one." He should have left then. Instead, Russell stepped onto the first porch stair. Echo stiffened but did not retreat. He stopped immediately, respecting the warning. Slowly, he set the folded blanket on the step between them. "For her?" he said. Gloria nodded. Echo lowered her nose to the blanket and sniffed. After a long moment, she placed one paw on it. It was nothing. It was everything. Russell turned back toward the marina, the toolbox in one hand, the empty bowl in the other. Behind him, the old hall stood silent. Gloria remained by the side door. Echo settled once more at the threshold, wounded and thin and impossibly loyal. By the time Russell reached his workshop, the engine in Bay 3 no longer seemed urgent. For the first time in years, he had the uneasy feeling that something broken had looked back at him and recognized a fellow ruin. And worse than that, some buried part of him had recognized her too. Russell Dane did not go back to Harbor Light Hall because he had changed his mind. He went back because by 7 the next morning, the temperature had fallen low enough to make metal complain. That was what he told himself as he crossed the marina with a tool bag in one hand and a coil of electrical tape in the other. The sky above Apostle Bay was bright and pale, the kind of winter blue that looked almost cheerful until the wind cut through a man's coat and reminded him that beauty had teeth. Snow glittered on the dock rails. The frozen lake stretched outward like a polished floor no one dared to cross. Echo was still on the porch. The German shepherd had curled herself against the double doors, nose tucked near her tail. But the moment Russell's boots touched the first step, one amber eye opened. She did not rise. She simply watched him as though taking attendance. "Morning to you two," Russell said. Echo gave no answer, which Russell found oddly respectful. The blanket he had left the day before had been dragged into a careful nest against the door. That should have made him feel better. It did not. The dog was still too thin, still too exposed, still wearing the stubborn dignity of a creature who had decided that comfort was less important than duty. The side door opened before Russell could knock. Gloria Hensley stood there in a plum scarf, wool coat, and black gloves, holding a brass key between two fingers, like a magician about to produce a rabbit. Frost clung to the edge of her hat. Her eyes were lively, but the skin beneath them was tired. "You came," she said. "I came to check the furnace and the locks." "Of course. Heaven forbid anyone accuse you of concern." "I prefer accurate accusations." Gloria smiled. "Come in before your personality freezes solid." Russell glanced at the key. "You're sure you're allowed in here?" "I helped run this place for 23 years. "That wasn't my question." "No," she said, unlocking the door. "But it was my answer." The hall exhaled when the door opened. Cold air drifted out first, old and dusty, carrying the scent of wood, paper, metal chairs, and something faintly sweet beneath it all, like coffee remembered by the walls. Russell stepped inside and paused despite himself. Harbor Light Hall was larger than it looked from the porch. The lobby opened into a main room with a low stage at the far end. Rows of folded chairs leaned against one wall, their metal legs dulled by years of use. A piano sat beneath a cloth cover, its shape slightly warped by age and damp. Paper snowflakes, yellowed and curled, still hung from a string near the ceiling, as if some winter party had ended only yesterday, and everyone had simply stepped out for air. Dust rested on everything, not the dirty dust of neglect alone, but the soft gray dust of interruption. A room waiting for someone to finish a sentence. Echo entered after Russell. She did not rush. Her paws touched the floorboards cautiously, then with more certainty. She moved through the lobby, past the coat hooks, past a bulletin board cluttered with old notices, and into the main hall. Her nose lowered. She followed invisible lines across the floor, stopping at certain places as though greeting ghosts. Russell did not like that thought. He set his tool bag down harder than necessary. "Furnace room?" he asked. Gloria pointed toward a narrow hallway. "Past the kitchen, but if you smell anything dramatic, that's not gas. That's the ghost of Warren Pike's salmon soup." "I don't believe in ghosts." "Most ghosts don't require belief, just poor ventilation." Russell gave her a look. She gave it back with interest. He went to work. The furnace was old but not dead. The kind of machine he understood. Stubborn, neglected, still capable if treated with patience and a little disrespect. He checked the pilot assembly, the wiring, the blower motor, the filter clogged with dust, thick enough to knit into a sweater. The lock on the side door had play in it. The front latch stuck. 2 outlets near the stage were unsafe. One section of baseboard heat had given up all earthly ambition. He made notes on a folded scrap of paper. Gloria drifted around the hall while he worked, not aimlessly, but like someone walking through a house where every object had once known her name. She straightened a crooked photograph, ran her gloved fingers along the edge of a table, lifted a stack of songbooks and blew dust from the top one, then immediately coughed. "Careful!" Russell called from under the stage, where he was testing an outlet. "That dust may have legal ownership by now." "Then it should pay taxes." Echo had found the piano. She stood before it with her torn left ear tilted forward, nose near the pedals. Slowly, she lowered herself to the floor beneath the instrument, folding her legs with a weary sigh. Her ribs still showed, but here, in the dim light below the stage, she seemed less like a stray dog and more like a guard returned to a post. Gloria saw her and went very still. "Neil used to sit there," she said. Russell slid out from beneath the stage. "Under the piano?" "Beside it. He claimed the old thing sounded better if someone kept it company." She smiled faintly. Neil Barlow was a terrible liar. He sat there because Echo liked that corner. Russell looked at the dog. Echo had set her chin on her paws, eyes half closed but aware. Gloria continued, softer now. "He was the caretaker, fixed chairs, swept floors, made soup when Amos couldn't. Pretended he hated the choir, then stood by the back wall mouthing every word." Russell stood, brushing dust from his sleeves. "You had a whole operation here." "We had a mess," Gloria said, "but a useful one." She walked to the wall of photographs. Russell followed only because the fuse box was near it, or so he told himself. The pictures were framed in cheap wood, some tilted from years of humidity. A group of dock workers in orange coats held bowls of soup and laughed at something outside the frame. A row of older women in knitted hats stood around a Christmas tree made from driftwood. A man in a wheelchair lifted a paper cup like a champagne glass. Gloria appeared in several of them, younger, fuller-faced, holding a silver microphone with the confidence of someone who knew how to enter a room and change its weather. Then Russell saw Marin, not the staged version from old albums, not the posed smile he had avoided for years. This Marin was half turned away from the camera, standing behind the choir, laughing with her mouth open and one hand pressed to her chest. Her blue scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck. The stage lights had caught her hair and made it glow. Russell's hand stopped near the fuse box. For a moment he forgot what he had been reaching for. Gloria noticed. She did not speak immediately. That mercy nearly undid him. "She sang here that night because Mrs. Alder's car wouldn't start," Gloria said at last. "Marin said a choir without altos was a boat without ballast. None of us knew what that meant, but we nodded because she was beautiful and sounded certain." Russell forced his hand to move. "She liked nautical metaphors." "She liked you." He tightened a screw that did not need tightening. "That wasn't a metaphor." "No," Gloria said. "It wasn't." The furnace kicked suddenly, a low rumble traveling through the pipes. Somewhere overhead, old metal clicked as warmth began its slow argument with the cold. Echo lifted her head. Gloria smiled toward the ceiling, as if the hall itself had cleared its throat. "There," Russell said. "It might hold for a while." High praise from the oracle of machinery. "It still needs real work. Filters, wiring, door seals, a qualified inspection before anyone uses this place." "Anyone alive?" "That includes you." Gloria placed one hand dramatically over her heart. "A man worries about me and disguises it as building code. How touching." "I'm serious." "I know," she said. "That's why it works." She crossed to the piano and pulled the cloth cover back. Dust rose in a pale cloud. The instrument beneath was dark wood, scarred and dull, but not without beauty. Gloria lifted the fallboard and touched a key. The note that emerged was sour, lonely, and brave. Russell flinched before he could stop himself. Gloria pretended not to see. She touched another key, then another. The piano answered like an old sailor waking from a nap and complaining about the weather. Echo stood, not fast, not startled, but fully alert, her eyes fixed on Gloria. The old woman drew a breath. It was only one line, barely that. A few words from an old winter tune, soft enough that the dust seemed to listen. Her voice cracked on the third note. She stopped. The silence afterward was worse than the broken note. It had weight. Gloria laughed quickly, too brightly. "Well," she said, touching her throat. "There she is, the famous Gloria Hensley, now featuring the vocal tone of a saxophone dropped into Lake Superior." Russell looked away. Echo did not. The shepherd stepped from beneath the piano and came to Gloria's side. She did not jump up, did not whine, did not perform any miracle fit for a sentimental postcard. She simply leaned her shoulder, very lightly, against the old woman's leg. Gloria's smile broke, only for a second. Then she put her gloved hand on Echo's head, fingers sinking into the rough fur between her ears. "Traitor," Gloria whispered. "You were supposed to admire my dignity." Echo blinked slowly, unimpressed. Russell felt the room shift around that small contact. Not dramatically. No choir of angels, no revelation in the rafters. Just an old singer, afraid of her own voice, a starving dog choosing closeness over fear, and a man who had spent years avoiding music, suddenly realizing silence had not protected anyone. It had only preserved the cold. He turned back toward the electrical panel because it was safer than looking at either of them. That was when the front doors opened. The sound was sharp in the hall, a scrape of old wood and winter air. Echo's head snapped up. Gloria's hand fell from the dog's fur. A man stepped inside with no hesitation, as if he already owned the room. He was in his mid-50s, slender, neat, and dressed too well for the marina in January. His long charcoal wool coat was spotless. A pale gray scarf lay flat against his chest. His leather gloves looked new, and before taking another step, he glanced down to ensure the snow from his shoes did not track too far across the floor. "Gloria," he said. The warmth in his voice had the temperature of polished steel. "Felix," Gloria replied. Russell did not move from the wall, but he watched the man's eyes. Felix Stroud's gaze traveled quickly. Furnace panel open, tool bag, piano uncovered, Echo near Gloria, dust disturbed, side entrance unlocked. He smiled as if each detail had confirmed something he had expected and disliked. "I wasn't aware the building had reopened," Felix said. "It hasn't," Gloria answered. "It inhaled." Felix's smile tightened. Poetic as always. His attention shifted to Russell. "And you are?" "Che, Russell Dane." "Ah, the marina mechanic." Russell let the word mechanic sit between them. Men like Felix often used ordinary work as a small blade. "That's right," Russell said. Felix removed one glove finger by finger. "Then I assume you're here for emergency maintenance?" "I saw some safety concerns." Safety is precisely why unauthorized access is a problem. Gloria lifted her chin. "I still have a key." "An old one," Felix said, "from an old arrangement." He opened the slim black leather folder tucked beneath his arm and withdrew a sheet of paper. Russell noticed the motion. Practiced, elegant, almost gentle. Felix did not need to raise his voice. He had paperwork. In some rooms, that was louder than thunder. "As you know," Felix continued, "Harbor Light Cultural Trust has been in default for some time. The loan attached to the roof repairs, kitchen upgrades, and heating system was acquired by my firm after First Apostle Bank folded its local portfolio. We have delayed action out of respect for the hall's history, but respect does not pay insurance, utilities, or debt." Gloria's expression did not change, but Russell saw her fingers curl at her sides. Felix looked around the hall. This building had its purpose. No one disputes that. But a purpose can expire. The town needs development, winter tourism, jobs that last longer than nostalgia. There is serious interest in this parcel as part of a lakeside resort plan. "A resort," Gloria said. "A future," Felix corrected. Echo moved. It was subtle at first. One step forward, then another. She placed herself not between Felix and the door, but between Felix and the stage. Russell noticed Felix notice. "Is that dog yours?" Felix asked. "No," Gloria said. "Then it shouldn't be inside." "She has better manners than most donors we used to entertain." "Gloria." The warning in Felix's voice was quiet. Russell set down the screwdriver he had been holding. The small metal sound against the floorboards made all three people look at him. Felix spoke first. "Mr. Dane, I appreciate your civic impulse, but this matter is already in motion." "I didn't say anything." "No," Felix replied, "but men like you often mistake silence for neutrality." Russell met his eyes. "That right?" Felix's smile returned. "Am I wrong?" For one breath, the old training inside Russell came alive. Assessed distance, exits, hands, voice, threat. But this was not a dockside fight or a hostile shoreline. This was an old hall with a cracked piano, a frightened singer, and a dog too thin to be standing. Russell looked at Echo. Her body trembled, but she did not yield. Felix folded the paper and slid it back into the folder. "The formal notice will arrive soon. I suggest you remove anything of sentimental value before the inventory process begins. Memories are easier to preserve when they are boxed voluntarily." Gloria's face went pale. That line did what the broken song had not. It made Russell angry, not loudly, not hotly. The anger came cold and clear, like lake ice thick enough to hold a man's weight. Felix turned toward the door. "Good day," he said. The winter rushed in as he left. The door closed behind him with a tired wooden thud. No one spoke. The hall seemed dimmer than before, though the furnace was running now. Echo remained near the stage, staring at the place where Felix had stood. Gloria took one step backward and sat on the piano bench as if her knees had quietly resigned. Russell crossed the room and picked up his tool bag. Gloria looked up at him. "Leaving?" He did not answer right away. His gaze moved across the hall, the photographs, the dust, the crooked paper snowflakes, the piano with its sour old heart, the stage where Marin had laughed in a blue scarf, and Echo standing guard in a body that had almost nothing left to give. "No," Russell said finally. He knelt by the outlet near the stage and opened his bag again. "I'm fixing the front latch first." Gloria stared at him. Russell kept his eyes on the screws. If someone's going to threaten a building, the least it can do is close properly. Echo came to stand beside him. She lowered her nose to his sleeve, sniffed once, and remained there. Gloria looked from the dog to the man on one knee with a screwdriver in his hand. Her voice, when it came, was not strong, but it was real. "Thank you, Mr. Dane." Russell tightened the first screw. "Don't thank me yet," he said. "I'm still only here for safety concerns." Gloria laughed softly. This time the hall seemed to hear it. By noon the next day, Russell Dane had lost the argument with himself. He had not planned to put a half-starved German shepherd in his truck. He had certainly not planned to drive her across Apostle Bay with one hand on the wheel and the other ready to catch her if she panicked. But Echo had spent another night on the porch of Harbor Light Hall, and when Russell arrived before sunrise, he found that her trembling had worsened. That settled it. Some decisions did not need emotion. A body in the cold required action. That was all. At least, that was what he kept telling himself. Echo stood in the truck bed at first, refusing the back seat, refusing the blanket, refusing anything that looked too much like being trapped. Russell waited. He had learned patience in worse places than a marina parking lot. Finally, after 10 silent minutes, Echo climbed into the cab on her own and settled on the passenger side floor, still tense, still watching every movement he made. "You know," Russell said, starting the engine, "most dogs enjoy being rescued." Echo stared through the windshield as if unimpressed by his customer service. Brooks Point Veterinary Clinic sat on a side street behind the post office, in a low brick building with a blue door and snow piled high under the windows. The sign had a painted paw print on it. Russell distrusted cheerful paw prints on principle, but the place smelled clean when he opened the door, and the receptionist did not squeal at Echo or try to grab her. That earned points. Dr. Taryn Wade came out from the examination room with a clipboard in one hand and a half-finished coffee in the other. She was not what Russell expected from a small-town veterinarian, though he wasn't sure what he had expected. Taryn moved quickly with the contained impatience of someone whose workday had already been interrupted by 3 emergencies and one person who thought a cat could walk off a broken tail. Her red-brown hair was tied low at the back of her neck. Freckles crossed the bridge of her nose. Her green-gray eyes assessed Echo first, Russell second, and the situation as a whole before anyone spoke. "That dog has been outside too long," she said. Russell looked down at Echo. "That was my impression." Taryn crouched several feet away, turning her body slightly sideways instead of facing Echo head-on. "Hi, girl." Echo did not move. "Smart," Taryn murmured. "Not rude, just smart." Russell liked her a little for that. The exam took longer than Echo wanted and less time than Russell feared. Taryn worked carefully, explaining each step without filling the room with pity. She checked Echo's gums, ribs, paws, ears, old scars, and the worn fur around her neck. When she touched the pale groove where a rope or hard collar had once rubbed too long, Echo turned her head sharply. Taryn stopped at once. "Fair enough," she said softly. "You get a vote?" Echo's amber eyes stayed on her. Russell stood near the wall, arms folded, trying not to appear too invested. It fooled no one. "She's malnourished," Taryn said after a while. "Not at the edge of collapse, but close enough that I don't like it. Dehydrated, too, some old bruising, scarring on her legs. No fresh fractures that I can feel. She's had a hard time of it." "Was she trained? As in military or police?" Taryn shook her head. "No clear signs of that. No tattoo, no chip registered to a working dog program, no response pattern I'd expect from a trained K9. But she's disciplined. Someone handled her once, maybe kindly, maybe inconsistently. Hard to tell." Echo stood very still while Taryn cleaned a shallow sore near her shoulder. "She belongs to the hall," Russell said before he could stop himself. Taryn glanced up. "Buildings don't own dogs." "This one might." A corner of Taryn's mouth moved. That sounds medically questionable, but emotionally plausible. Russell looked away. Taryn wrapped the cleaned sore and prepared medication. She needs food, but slowly. Too much too fast can hurt her. Warm place to sleep. Consistent routine, no crowding, no sudden touching. And she needs to know the place she keeps going back to isn't going to keep hurting her. Russell frowned. You talking about the dog or the town? I try to be efficient. He did not answer. Taryn handed him a paper bag with medication and feeding instructions written in sharp, practical handwriting. You can feed her, you can treat the sores. But fear doesn't leave an animal just because the weather improves. She needs safety that repeats itself. The sentence landed somewhere Russell had not given permission. Safety that repeats itself. He thought of his own house, clean, quiet, locked, food in the pantry, tools in order, bed made every morning, a place built with all the habits of safety and none of the feeling. Echo nudged the exam room door with her nose. She wants to go, Russell said. Taryn looked at him. No, she wants to return. There was a difference. Russell did not like that there was a difference. By late afternoon, he had brought Echo back to Harbor Light Hall. Gloria was already inside, wrapped in her red wine cardigan, moving chairs away from the wall with the determination of a much younger woman and the joints of a woman who would regret it later. When she saw the bandage on Echo's shoulder, her face changed. Is she badly hurt? Badly neglected, Russell said. Not broken. Gloria let out a breath. That makes one of us. Echo crossed the room without greeting either of them and went straight beneath the piano. There she circled twice and laid down with a sigh that seemed to come from a deeper century. Russell set the medicine bag on a table. Taryn says she needs a warm place and routine. Taryn always did have a gift for making common sense sound like a prescription. You know her? I know everyone who has ever looked me in the eye while telling me not to climb a ladder. Russell glanced toward the piano. Echo keeps going back there. Neil kept blankets under the bench, said the drafts were worse near the floor. Russell went to the piano, crouched, and looked beneath the bench. At first he saw only dust, an old cable, and a forgotten hymn book with a warped cover. Then Echo lifted her head and pushed her nose toward the back panel. Not frantic, not dramatic, just insistent. Russell reached farther and felt cloth. He pulled out a folded wool blanket, gray with age and dog hair. Behind it came a small tin of buttons, 2 pencils, a cracked pair of reading glasses, and a stack of thin notebooks bound with rubber bands. Gloria went quiet. Russell looked over his shoulder. Neil's? She nodded slowly. He wrote everything down. Soup inventory, repairs, who needed a ride, who pretended they didn't need a ride. The first notebook opened with a list of mundane things. Furnace filter sizes, chair counts, dates of snow shoveling, the names of volunteers who brought bread. Russell nearly closed it, embarrassed by the intimacy of ordinary records. But a folded envelope slipped from between the pages and landed on the floor. Gloria picked it up. Inside were photocopies of donor letters. Russell saw the Harbor Light letterhead. Pledges, matching funds, winter meal support. A grant for kitchen improvements. Gloria's brow creased. I remember this one. You got the money? We were told it fell through. Russell opened another notebook. More receipts, repair invoices, a list of expected donations, and besides several entries, Neil's cramped handwriting, never posted to account, ask Marta, Felix says deferred, check again. The hall seemed to settle around them. There was no thunderclap, no sudden proof of a crime. Just paper, dates, questions, small notations made by a caretaker who had not been important enough for people to fear, and perhaps for that reason had seen more than they knew. Russell read one line twice. Roof repair billed twice? Gloria sat down on the piano bench. "That can't be right," she said, but her voice had already begun to doubt itself. Russell gathered the papers carefully. His old training stirred again, but this time there was no adrenaline, only structure. Sort what you know. Separate fact from assumption. Identify who understands the terrain. "Who's Marta?" he asked. Gloria did not answer immediately. "Marta Keene," she said at last. "Bookkeeping for the marina office. Part-time for the trust, back when there was enough trust left to require books." "She's still in town?" "Yes." "Then we ask her." Gloria looked toward the front windows, where snow had begun falling again in soft, bright flakes. "Marta doesn't like questions." "Most people don't." "She scares easily." Russell stacked the notebooks. "Then we don't scare her." It took them 30 minutes to find Marta Keene, though she was only 2 buildings away. The marina office occupied a narrow room above the chandlery, warmed by a space heater that clicked too loudly and smelled faintly of dust. Marta sat behind a desk crowded with file trays, receipt boxes, a chipped mug of tea, and a gray calculator whose number keys had been worn nearly blank. She was short, round-shouldered, with chin-length brown hair threaded with silver. Her cardigan was beige, her glasses hung from a cord around her neck, and her hands rested over a stack of papers as if protecting them from bad news. When Russell entered with Gloria, Marta looked first at him, then at the notebooks under his arm, and finally at Echo, who had followed them up the stairs with slow, deliberate steps. Marta's face lost color. "Oh," she said. It was not a greeting, it was recognition. Gloria closed the door gently. "Marta." "I'm busy." "We won't take long," Russell said. Marta looked at him with a flash of fear disguised as irritation. "That's what men say before they take hours." Russell almost smiled. "Fair?" He placed the notebooks on the corner of the desk, not too close. Marta did not touch them. "Neil kept records," Gloria said. "Yes, Neil kept napkin counts too. Neil kept records of seagulls if they offended him." Russell opened one notebook to the donor list. "Some of these funds never reached the hall account." Marta's fingers tightened around the calculator. "I wouldn't know." "You were bookkeeper." "Part-time. I entered what I was given." "By Felix?" Marta's eyes snapped to his. "You should be careful." "With what?" "With names that can cost people things." The room went quiet except for the heater clicking itself into another cycle. Echo moved then. She had stayed near the door until that moment, watching Marta with the wary calm she gave to wounded things. Slowly she crossed the office. Marta stiffened, but Echo did not crowd her. She came to the side of the chair and rested her head gently against Marta's knee. Marta stopped breathing for a second. Her hand hovered above Echo's head, trembling. "I didn't know all of it," Marta whispered. Gloria's face softened, but she stayed silent. Marta's fingers lowered into Echo's fur. "I saw things, not enough to prove, just enough to feel sick. They said the hall was bleeding money. They said if the reports didn't show it clearly, no one would approve a clean transfer. They said people would lose jobs. They said Elliot had mishandled funds, and if I questioned it, they'd open everything, and I'd be blamed for not catching it sooner." Russell listened. Marta swallowed. "I signed summaries I shouldn't have signed." "No one's accusing you," Gloria said. Marta laughed once, small and bitter. "I am." Echo leaned a little more weight against her knee. That broke something. Marta covered her mouth with one hand, eyes shining. "That dog used to sit outside Neil's office. He'd talk to her like she was the board president. Maybe she would have done better than the rest of us." Russell slid the notebook a little closer. "Can these records help?" "Maybe, but not alone." Marta wiped at her face quickly, embarrassed by her own tears. Neil saw pieces. I saw pieces. There's one person who may have the old ledgers. Who? Marta looked down at Echo. Elliot Crane. Gloria's expression changed. Russell noticed. The former treasurer. Marta nodded. They blamed him when the trust account started looking wrong. Said he was disorganized, careless, maybe worse. He left town before the winter festival that year, but Elliot was many things. Careless wasn't one of them. Where is he? I don't know exactly. Last I heard, west of Bayfield, maybe near the rail line. He doesn't answer people from Apostle Bay. Russell looked at the notebooks, then at Gloria, then at Echo, still leaning against Marta's knee like a small, silent verdict. For years he had understood missions by their clarity. Coordinates, objective, extraction point, chain of command, success or failure, brutal but defined. This had none of that. A starving dog, a singer afraid to sing, a hall full of dust, a frightened bookkeeper, a dead caretaker's notes, a man named Felix who spoke softly and carried legal paper like a blade, and somewhere beyond the frozen roads, an old treasurer who had taken the blame and vanished. Russell picked up Neil's notebooks. Gloria watched him. What are you thinking? He thought of Echo on the porch, of the way she had guarded a door that no longer promised shelter, of Gloria's cracked note hanging in the cold air, of Marta's hand trembling in fur because forgiveness had arrived on four thin legs and asked for nothing. I'm thinking, Russell said, this isn't an engine problem. No, Gloria said. He tucked the notebooks under one arm. But engines make sense, he continued. When they fail, there's a reason. You find the brake, trace the line, test what still works. Marta looked up at him. Russell's face remained calm, but something in his eyes had changed. Not softness, not yet. Direction. So, he said, we start tracing. Echo lifted her head from Marta's knee as if the room itself had shifted. Outside, snow fell over Apostle Bay in clean white layers, covering tracks almost as quickly as they were made. But inside the marina office, beneath the hum of the space heater and the smell of old paper, the first line had been uncovered. And Russell Dane, who had spent years refusing missions that involved the human heart, realized he had already accepted one. Gloria Hensley announced the idea as if she were ordering coffee. One night, she said. That's all. Russell Dane looked up from the loose wiring near the stage. No. Gloria stood in the center of Harbor Light Hall with a clipboard she had found in the kitchen and no legal authority whatsoever. Echo sat beside her, ears alert, torn left tip, angled like a question mark. The German shepherd had gained a little strength in the past few days, enough to look less like a ghost and more like a judge. Gloria tapped the clipboard with a pencil. You haven't asked what I'm proposing. I heard enough at one night. A winter open room? No. Soup, coffee, bread, a few chairs, maybe a song if no one dies of embarrassment. The furnace barely holds. 2 outlets are unsafe. The front latch sticks. The floor near the kitchen door is warped, and if this building is under financial dispute, opening it to the public might create insurance problems. Gloria's face brightened. Excellent! You already have a repair list. Russell stared at her. She smiled. See? We're cooperating? He was beginning to understand how Harbor Light Hall had survived as long as it had. Gloria did not defeat resistance. She simply treated it as unpaid help. This is not a performance, she said, softer now. And it is not a fundraiser with balloons and speeches. I don't have the energy to pretend joy comes with a sign-up sheet. It's just one open room before Felix turns this place into a brochure. Russell wiped his hands on a rag. You think soup stops lawyers? No, but silence feeds them. That landed harder than he wanted it to. Near the piano, Echo lowered herself to the floor with a slow sigh, as if the humans were finally approaching the correct level of seriousness. Russell pointed at her. She needs rest. She will have a blanket. She needs quiet. She has survived my singing. Her standards are flexible. He almost laughed. It escaped only as a breath, but Gloria noticed and wisely did not celebrate. By afternoon, the hall had become something between a repair site, a kitchen, and a mutiny. Dr. Taryn Wade arrived first, carrying a canvas medical bag, 2 folded blankets, and a sack of special food for Echo. Snow clung to her boots. Her red-brown hair had escaped its tie in several places, giving her the look of someone who had argued with the weather and lost only by choice. She's walking better, Taryn said, crouching near Echo without crowding her. That's good. She still thinks she owns the stage, Russell said. Taryn glanced around. Maybe she has the strongest claim. Marta Keene came next, though she tried to enter as if the building might not notice her. She carried a brown folder pressed tightly against her chest. Her beige cardigan was buttoned wrong by 1 button, and her glasses hung on their cord like a tiny accusation. I brought copies, she murmured. Gloria did not rush her. Thank you, Marta. They may not be enough. They're more than we had. Marta looked toward Echo, who was watching from beside the piano. I almost didn't come. Echo gave a soft breath through her nose. Marta swallowed. Yes, well, don't look at me like that. By 4 o'clock, Russell had the furnace running more evenly, 2 dangerous outlets taped off, the front latch adjusted, and 3 signs taped up in his blocky handwriting. No entry past kitchen door. Do not touch stage wires. If something sparks, find Russell, Gloria added beneath the last one. Or pray faster. Russell crossed it out. She wrote it again, smaller. Before sunset, Deputy Laurel Voss appeared in the doorway, bringing a gust of cold and the unmistakable presence of local law. Laurel was 46, compact and steady, with dark hair cut at her jaw, and eyes that looked as if they had learned to separate truth from noise for a living. Her winter duty jacket was zipped to the throat, radio clipped near her shoulder, boots dusted white. I heard you were reopening the hall, she said. Gloria lifted a hand, temporarily breathing life into it. Laurel looked at Russell. Is the building safe? No, he said. Gloria said, safer than yesterday. Russell added, that is unfortunately true. Laurel's mouth twitched, nearly a smile. I'm not here to shut you down, but I am here to say this clearly. Feelings won't stop a debt action. If Felix pushes this into court or a formal seizure process, you'll need documentation, witnesses, and no public incident he can use against you. Gloria's humor faded. You think he'll come? I think Felix Stroud never misses a room where people underestimate him. Laurel's gaze drifted toward the stage. For a moment, her official mask loosened. I ate here my first winter after the divorce, she said. Didn't know anyone. Didn't want anyone to know that mattered. Gloria's expression softened. You sat in the back and kept your coat on. I was planning a fast escape. You stayed for pie? Laurel looked away. The pie was tactical. Russell glanced at her. For the first time, he understood that Harbor Light Hall had not been sentimental to these people. It had been infrastructure, not pipes or roads, but something just as necessary in winter, a place where pride could sit down without being questioned. By 6, the snow outside had begun to fall in bright, soft sheets. People came slowly. Not a crowd, not enough to fill the room, but enough to change the air. Warren Pike arrived carrying a dented silver pot with both hands. He was a broad old man with white eyebrows, a red nose, and the permanently offended walk of someone whose knees had filed complaints years ago. He had once built fishing boats before the industry shrank and left him with too many tools and not enough hulls. "Salmon soup," he announced. "If anybody calls it chowder, I'm leaving." "Good to see you too, Warren," Gloria said. Denise Malloy came behind him with a stack of clean tablecloths in her arms. She owned the town laundromat, had been widowed for 8 years, and kept her grief folded as neatly as the linens she carried. She kissed Gloria's cheek and immediately began covering tables that did not strictly need covering. "Dust is not a design choice," Denise said. "It is in some galleries," Gloria replied. "Not in mine." Reverend Amos Bell arrived last among the early ones, leaning slightly on a cane but wearing a smile warm enough to qualify as heating assistance. He was 68, retired from formal ministry but not from noticing people. His gray curls peeked from beneath a wool cap, and he carried a small black notebook bound with an elastic band. Russell saw the notebook and stiffened, thinking of Neil's records. Amos noticed. "Names," he said, lifting it gently. "Not debts." "Names?" "People who came for supper over the years. Some folks think food is the miracle. It isn't. The miracle is when someone remembers you like your coffee week and your chair near the radiator." As the room warmed, so did the noise. Bowls clinked, chairs scraped. Warren complained that the kitchen ladle had been designed by a person with no respect for soup. Denise scolded 2 men for shaking snow onto her tablecloths. Marta sat near the wall, folder in her lap, looking as if courage had weight and she had carried it too far to put it down now. Echo moved carefully among them. She did not beg. She did not seek attention. She passed from person to person with cautious dignity, accepting a soft word here, a hand offered there. Some people recognized her. Others only knew there was a wounded shepherd in the hall, and that somehow, without asking permission, she had become part of its authority. Russell kept to the stage area, repairing cables and testing an old speaker that had no right to still function. His hands worked from memory. Strip wire, check connection, reduce noise, isolate the fault, clean the contact. His Navy years had taught him the religion of communication. A signal either reached its destination or it failed. There was no poetry in a dead channel. But then the microphone squealed. A sharp burst of feedback cut across the hall. Russell froze. The sound opened something in him before he could brace against it. Not combat, not gunfire. Something worse because it had once been gentle. Marin laughing into a microphone. Marin saying, "Too much gain, sailor." Marin singing beneath warm lights, blue scarf at her throat, turning toward him as if every ordinary room could become holy if someone dared to fill it with sound. Russell set the cable down. The room blurred at the edges. He walked off the stage before anyone noticed, pushing through the side door into the narrow hallway where the cold gathered around the old walls. He braced one hand against the plaster and breathed through his teeth. Footsteps did not follow. Pause did. Echo came into the hallway and sat beside him. She did not lean this time. She did not nudge. She simply occupied the cold with him, as if standing watch over the part of him that still expected grief to ambush him from speakers and songs. Russell looked down at her. "I don't hate music," he said. The words sounded strange, too simple for how long they had taken to arrive. Echo's amber eyes held his. "I hate that it stayed beautiful," he whispered, after she was gone. He expected the confession to break something. It did not. It only entered the air and became true. Echo lowered her head, resting her chin on his boot. Russell placed his hand on the rough fur between her ears, careful of the torn left tip. The hallway remained cold. The grief remained grief. But for once, it did not have him alone. When he returned to the hall, Gloria was standing near the microphone. She wore no stage dress, no glittering shawl, no grand armor of performance. Just her red wine cardigan, a silver scarf, and the expression of a woman about to step onto thin ice in front of people who remembered when she could fly. "Don't make it loud," she said to Russell. "I won't." "Don't make it pretty if it isn't." "I can only work with the signal I get." That made her smile, though her eyes were wet. He lowered the gain, adjusted the angle, took the harsh edge out of the speaker. The room settled. Conversation faded. No one announced a show. No one clapped to summon her. They simply turned toward Gloria because some old instincts still knew where the hearth was. She sang the first line softly. Her voice trembled. On the second line, it thinned. On the third, it cracked. Warren looked down into his soup as if it contained classified emotional material. Denise pressed one hand against her own chest. Laurel stood near the door, arms folded, face unreadable except for the shine in her eyes. Gloria stopped for half a breath. Russell adjusted the microphone lower and warmer, not hiding the age in her voice, only giving it room. The speaker carried her honestly now, close, human, frayed at the edges and therefore impossible to dismiss. Gloria began again. This time Amos joined her. His baritone was rusty but steady. Then Denise, quietly. Then Warren, loudly and in the wrong key, which caused Gloria to shoot him a look sharp enough to peel paint. A few people laughed, and the laughter did not ruin the song. It saved it. More voices entered. Not a choir reborn in glory. Not yet. Just a room remembering how to breathe together. Echo lay beneath the piano, eyes half closed, her bandaged shoulder visible in the amber light. She looked less like a stray now and more like a guardian curled beside a small, newly lit fire. Russell stood at the side of the stage with one hand on the soundboard. He did not sing. He was not ready. But he stayed, and that for him was not a small thing. When the song ended, no one applauded at first. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of spoons held still, old griefs shifting in their chairs, and the strange embarrassment people feel after being seen together. Then Warren cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "that was almost music." Gloria laughed first. Then the room did. Bowls were refilled. Coffee was poured. Someone found napkins. Amos read 3 names from his notebook, not as a ceremony, but as a remembrance. Marta placed her folder on a side table, and after a long pause, left her hand resting on top of it where everyone could see. No one solved anything that night. Felix still had papers. The debt still existed. The hall still needed repairs, money, and legal ground, firmer than memory. But when Russell stepped outside near the end of the evening, the snow had covered the boardwalk in clean white light. Through the windows behind him came the low murmur of voices, the clink of bowls, Gloria correcting Warren's pitch with affectionate cruelty, and 1 or 2 uncertain notes from the piano. Echo came to the doorway and stood beside him, no longer blocking the entrance from everyone, but watching over it all the same. Russell looked back into Harbor Light Hall. It did not need to become what it had been. That was the mistake grief made, trying to rebuild the dead exactly as they were. The hall did not need youth, Polish, or perfect songs. It only needed to remain bright enough for one lonely person to find the door. Russell reached down and rested his hand briefly on Echo's head. "All right," he said, though he was not sure whether he spoke to the dog, the hall, Marin, or the part of himself that had finally stopped walking away. Inside, someone began another song. This time, Russell left the door open behind him and went back in. The notice arrived before the coffee was done. Russell found it taped to the front door of Harbor Light Hall at 7:12 in the morning, sealed in a plastic sleeve against the snow. Felix Stroud had chosen cream-colored paper, heavy stock, the sort used by people who believed bad news became more respectable when printed well. Gloria stood behind Russell with her coat only half-buttoned, silver scarf twisted crookedly at her throat. Echo sat on the porch between them, watching the paper as if it smelled wrong. Russell read it once, then again. Inventory inspection scheduled for 3 p.m. Preliminary asset review prior to debt recovery action. Representatives authorized by Stroud Harbor Finance and associated creditors. Building access required. Gloria took the notice from him with fingers that did not tremble until the second line. "They move quickly when they smell soup," she said. Russell looked toward the marina, where pale morning light lay on the frozen docks. The sweetness of the night before still seemed to linger in the hall's windows. Warm bowls. Bad singing. Gloria's cracked voice steadied by other voices. Echo beneath the piano. For a few hours, Harbor Light Hall had felt less like a failing property than a lantern someone had remembered to light. Felix had seen the glow. Now he had come to snuff it before it spread. "Laurel needs to know," Russell said. "She will." "Marta?" "In the kitchen. She got here before me." Russell turned. Through the frosted glass, he could make out a small figure moving inside the hall. Marta Keene, who had spent years trying not to be noticed, had arrived before sunrise carrying a folder of copied records and the face of a woman reporting to her own judgment. Gloria lowered the notice. "What are you going to do?" Russell thought of engines, wires, maps, routes. When something failed, you traced the line backward until you found where the signal broke. "I'm going to find Elliot Crane." Gloria went still. "You know where he is?" "No. Marta said west of Bayfield near the rail line." "That's not an address." "It's a start." "Russell, it's nearly 2 hours each way in clear weather." "Then I should leave now." Gloria studied him. In her eyes was a fear she did not want to dignify by naming. "And if he won't come?" Russell folded the notice and handed it back to her. "Then I'll come back with what we have." "That sounds very brave and not at all comforting." "It wasn't meant to be comforting." Echo stood as if she had decided the conversation required supervision. She took one step toward Russell's truck, then looked back at the hall. Russell shook his head. "Not this time." The dog's ears shifted. "You stay with Gloria." Echo did not like that. It was visible in the set of her shoulders, the way she looked from Russell to the door and back again. For the first time since he had known her, Russell saw not stubbornness, but conflict. The hall was her post. Russell, somehow, had become part of the perimeter. Gloria crouched stiffly and touched Echo's neck. "We'll guard the kingdom, Your Majesty." Echo looked unconvinced. Russell drove west under a sky the color of pewter polished thin. The road out of Apostle Bay wound through snow-covered pines and long stretches of white field broken by fences, barns, and the occasional mailbox, leaning like a tired soldier. His truck heater groaned. Neil Barlow's notebook lay on the passenger seat, held open by Russell's old folding knife, the one engraved with Marin's initials. He had not planned the symbolism. He disliked when objects became heavier than their use. But as the miles passed, his eyes kept returning to the page Gloria had marked the night before. Neil's handwriting was cramped, practical, impatient with wasted space. "If I am not here when they come for the hall, do not let them sell the room like a storage shed." Below it, in smaller letters, "Ask Elliot." He remembers the first ledger. Russell had read the line 5 times before dawn. At a gas station near Bayfield, he asked after Elliot Crane. The clerk, a young man who looked as if he had been born tired, pointed him toward a cluster of rental houses beyond the rail crossing. "Old guy with the hat?" the clerk said. "Pays cash, buys black coffee and pencils. Doesn't talk much." "That sounds like him." "You know him?" "No." The clerk shrugged. "Then you're already ahead of most people." Elliot Crane lived in the last house before the tracks, a narrow blue rental with peeling trim and a porch cleared with military precision despite the snow. A freight train sat idle in the distance, its dark cars lined up like a sentence waiting to be finished. Russell parked by the road. Before he reached the porch, the door opened. The man who stood there was thinner than Russell expected. Elliot Crane was 64, though hardship had made an early claim on him. His shoulders sloped beneath an old brown wool coat. A gray flat cap shaded pale blue eyes. His beard was trimmed but uneven, as if grooming had become a courtesy he performed only for himself. He looked at Russell's boots, his combat shirt visible beneath the jacket, then at the notebook under his arm. "No," Elliot said. Russell stopped on the bottom step. "I haven't asked anything." "You came from Apostle Bay, that's the question. Harbor Light Hall is being inventoried today." Then they finally got what they wanted. Felix did. Elliot's mouth tightened. Felix never wanted the hall. He wanted the lakefront. The hall was just in the way. Russell held up the notebook. Neil Barlow left records. For the first time, Elliot's expression changed. Not dramatically, just a crack in the ice. "Neil's dead," Elliot said. "Yes? I knew that." Knowing isn't the same as hearing it said. Elliot looked away toward the tracks. Russell did not push. He understood men who needed silence before entering grief. The world often mistook that pause for weakness. Sometimes it was the last piece of dignity a man had left. Finally, Elliot said, "Apostle Bay decided I stole from them." "Did you?" The old man's eyes snapped back, sharp now. "No." "Then come say so." Elliot laughed once, dry and joyless. "You think truth is a dog whistle? Blow it and everyone comes running?" "No." "Good, because truth is paperwork. Paperwork is missing. Memories get edited. People who looked away suddenly remember themselves as victims. And men like Felix arrive with folders no one wants to read." Russell held out the notebook. Elliot did not take it. "Neil wrote your name," Russell said. "He said you remembered the first ledger." The old man's face hardened. "Neil should have left me buried." "He didn't." A train horn sounded far down the line, low and mournful. Snow slid from the porch roof in a soft collapse. Russell opened the notebook to the marked page and turned it toward Elliot. The old man read. His mouth moved slightly over Neil's words. When he reached the line about the room not being sold like a storage shed, his hand rose, but he still did not touch the page. For a long moment there was only the wind and the distant metal sigh of the rail yard. Then Elliot whispered, "Stubborn old fool. Sounds like people liked him." "No," Elliot said. "People trusted him. Liking was optional." That was when Russell saw it. A small framed photograph on the wall behind Elliot, half hidden beyond the doorway. Harbor Light Hall, years earlier. A group of volunteers in winter coats. Neil Barlow with one hand raised against the camera. Gloria laughing. Elliot younger, standing near the edge with a ledger tucked under his arm. And at the bottom of the frame, not fully centered, a younger Echo lying by the piano bench, watching everyone as if already keeping count. Russell nodded toward the photo. "She's still there." Elliot followed his gaze. "Echo." "She sleeps near the stage." The old man closed his eyes. That did what arguments could not. Not proof, not pressure. A dog's name. A room remembered. The unbearable evidence that life had gone on without him, and yet had somehow kept a place for his return. Elliot opened the door wider. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. At 2:53 p.m., Felix Stroud arrived at Harbor Light Hall with 2 men in dark coats and a woman carrying a tablet. Deputy Laurel Voss was already there. She stood near the front doors in uniform, hands relaxed but ready, her presence making it clear that no one in the room would be allowed the luxury of becoming foolish. Marta sat at a table near the kitchen with folders arranged in straight lines. Taryn held Echo's leash loosely, though anyone watching could see the leash was more legal courtesy than restraint. Gloria stood on the stage, not performing, simply refusing to stand anywhere smaller. Felix removed his gloves. "Deputy," he said, "I trust this won't be difficult." "That depends on everyone," Laurel replied. Felix smiled, reasonable as always. He glanced at the scattered chairs, the soup bowls drying near the kitchen, the microphone stand still in place. Evidence of the previous night remained everywhere. Not mess, life. His smile thinned. "I am not here to debate sentiment," he said, raising his voice just enough for the room. "This is an inventory review prior to lawful debt recovery. My firm has extended patience for years. Patience cannot become negligence." Gloria folded her arms. "Funny, that's what I said about my second husband." No one laughed loudly, but Warren Pike, who had come to help move nothing, coughed into his hand suspiciously. Felix ignored it. "We will begin with the stage equipment, kitchen assets, furniture, and any items of appraised value." At that, Echo stood. Taryn murmured, "Easy." Echo did not pull. She simply watched Felix approach the stage. Marta rose from her chair. "Before you proceed, there are records that need review." Felix did not look at her immediately. When he did, his expression was almost kind, and that was worse. "Marta, this is not the time for anxiety." Color rose in her face. Her fingers gripped the back of the chair. Laurel's voice cut in. "Let her speak." Felix turned slightly. "Deputy, unless there is a court order—" "There isn't," Laurel said. "There also isn't a reason to prevent a former bookkeeper from identifying relevant documents during an asset review, unless you'd like to make one." For the first time, Felix paused. The front doors opened before he could respond. Cold air swept across the room. Russell entered first, snow on his shoulders, Neil's notebooks under one arm. Behind him came Elliot Crane. The old treasurer removed his flat cap with both hands. He did not stride in like a hero. He looked cold, tired, and deeply unwilling to be watched. But he did not turn back. Gloria's hand flew to her mouth. Marta whispered, "Elliot!" Felix's face changed so slightly that most people would have missed it. Russell did not. Elliot stepped forward, eyes on the floorboards, then on the stage, then on Echo. The shepherd took one step toward him, nose lifted. "Hello, old girl," Elliot said. His voice nearly broke on the last word. Echo's tail moved once. Elliot looked at Felix. "I signed the first loan papers." The room went still. "And I was wrong," Elliot continued, "to leave before I made everyone read the second set." Felix recovered quickly. "Mr. Crane, I'm sure whatever grievances you carry can be addressed in the appropriate forum." "This is a room full of people you intend to inventory," Elliot said. "Seems appropriate enough." Marta opened her folder. Together, not smoothly but carefully, she and Elliot began laying out the pieces. The original roof repair loan, the later restructuring, a consulting fee paid to a development advisory company tied through two shell entities to Felix's firm. Donor pledges listed as deferred, though the donors had never withdrawn. A kitchen improvement grant redirected into site feasibility review. Invoices copied twice under slightly different vendor names. It was not enough to send Felix away in handcuffs. It was enough to make the woman with the tablet stop typing. It was enough to make Laurel step closer. It was enough to make Gloria sit down on the edge of the stage as if her legs had finally received the news. Felix's voice chilled. "These are fragments, misinterpretations by people who do not understand financial restructuring." Elliot nodded. "Maybe that is why the town board should see them." Felix's eyes narrowed. "The board has already reviewed the trust's insolvency." Not these ledgers, Marta said. Her voice shook, but it existed. Felix looked at her, and the kindness was gone. Be careful, Marta. Echo moved before Russell did. She did not lunge. She did not bark. She walked out from beside Taryn and placed herself in front of Gloria, between the stage and Felix. Her bandaged shoulder was visible. Her ribs still showed faintly beneath her coat. But her back was straight, her torn ear lifted, her amber eyes fixed on the man with the leather folder. Taryn held the leash but did not pull. Felix exhaled sharply. Remove the dog. This is an unsafe environment. No one moved. Then Warren Pike stood. Denise stood beside him. Amos Bell rose slowly with his cane. Marta, trembling, remained on her feet. Laurel did not smile, but one eyebrow lifted as if to say, Felix should consider the optics of ordering a wounded dog removed from a community hall full of witnesses. Russell crossed to the sound table. Felix watched him. What are you doing? Testing equipment. This is not the time. It's on your inventory list. Russell turned on the old system. A low hum filled the hall. Then, from Gloria's small recorder connected by a frayed auxiliary cable, came sound. Not a song at first. Bowls clinking, laughter, someone asking for more coffee. A man's voice saying, "Put my chair near the radiator, Neil. My knees filed for divorce." Then a choir entered, uneven and warm, singing off-key with the confidence of people who had survived worse things than embarrassment. Gloria closed her eyes. Marin's voice came faintly in the background of one recording, not leading, not perfect, just there, laughing through a line, singing with others. Alive in the only way the dead are allowed to be, briefly and without permission. Russell kept his hand on the soundboard. The room listened. Felix's inventory team did not move. The hall had changed shape. It was no longer an asset list. It was not chairs, tables, wire, piano, kitchen equipment. It was a record of use, a ledger of warmth, a place that had held human beings when winter made them small. When the recording ended, the silence did not belong to Felix. Laurel spoke first. Given the documentation presented and the potential conflict of interest, I recommend suspending today's inventory until the town board reviews these materials. Felix turned to her. You recommend? Yes. This is a civil matter. And this is a public building held by a cultural trust with disputed records. I'm not blocking you. I'm advising you not to create a bigger problem in front of witnesses. Felix looked around the room. For the first time, he seemed to understand that Winter Open Room had not ended the previous night. It had multiplied. Every person there was a witness now, not just to papers, but to posture, tone, threat, and resistance. He put his gloves back on slowly. This delays nothing permanently, he said. No, Elliot replied, but it delays you. Felix's eyes flicked to Russell. You've made yourself busy, Mr. Dane. Russell met his gaze. I fix things. Some things are beyond repair. Russell looked at Echo, then at Gloria, then at the crooked photographs on the wall. Maybe, he said, but I check the wiring before I declare a thing dead. Felix left without another word. His people followed. The doors closed, and for several seconds, no one moved. Then Gloria let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, almost like a sob. Echo turned and walked to Elliot. The old treasurer knelt with difficulty. He placed one shaking hand on her head. I should have come back sooner, he whispered. Echo leaned into him, not forgiving everything, because dogs were not judges of human paperwork. But she accepted the hand. Sometimes that was enough to begin. Russell stood by the soundboard, the old recording still loaded, Marin's voice now silent again. The seizure had stopped. For now. Felix was not defeated. The debt had not vanished. The ledgers still needed review, and the town would have to hear the truth in a room larger and colder than this one. But Harbor Light Hall had survived the afternoon. Outside, snow fell over the marina, covering Felix's footprints almost as soon as he made them. Inside, the hall held its breath, not in fear this time, but in preparation. The fight had moved beyond the walls. And Russell knew the next room would not be warmed by soup. The town administration building stood at the edge of the frozen lake, square and practical, with wide windows facing the water as if the town itself needed witnesses. Snow fell lightly that morning. Not the punishing kind that erased roads and swallowed rooftops, but the bright, patient kind that softened edges without hiding them. Apostle Bay looked almost peaceful under it. The marina masts still, the sidewalks brushed white, the old street lamps glowing through daylight had already arrived. Russell Dane arrived early with a portable speaker, a small soundboard, and a coil of cables in a plastic crate. He did not bring them because anyone had asked. He brought them because rooms had a way of swallowing weak voices, and today weak voices needed help being heard. Echo walked beside him on a loose leash, her black and tan coat brushed clean, her bandaged shoulder mostly healed. She still carried thinness in the line of her ribs, and the pale, worn ring around her neck remained visible beneath her fur. But she moved with more certainty now. Her torn left ear tilted toward every motion, every shift of light, every human hesitation. Inside, the hearing room was already filling. People came in heavy coats and knitted hats, carrying folders, coffee thermoses, and expressions that suggested most of them had not expected to care this much about a building. Folding chairs had been set in rows. At the front, 3 members of the town board sat behind a long table with microphones that looked older than some of the grudges in the room. Marta Keene sat near the aisle with Elliot Crane beside her. Their papers were arranged in careful stacks between them, like sandbags before a flood. Marta wore a chestnut sweater and kept one hand on her old gray calculator. Elliot had his flat cap in his lap and a sharpened pencil tucked behind one ear, though Russell doubted he needed it. Some men carried tools to remind themselves who they were. Gloria Hensley sat in the second row, wrapped in a dark coat and silver scarf, her old stage microphone resting in a cloth bag on her knees. She had not brought it to use. Russell understood that. Some objects were not instruments anymore. They were proof that a person had once been unafraid. Taryn Wade stood near the wall, practical boots planted apart, watching Echo with one eye and the room with the other. Deputy Laurel Voss was also present, not at the front, not behind anyone, but near the side where she could see every door. She was off duty in appearance only. Her face carried the same steady warning as ever. Stay human, or I will remind you. Reverend Amos Bell arrived with his small black notebook. Warren Pike came muttering about municipal chairs being designed by enemies of the spine. Denise Malloy followed him and immediately began brushing snow from the back of his coat, like a woman who had corrected worse men than him, and survived. At precisely 9 o'clock, Felix Stroud entered. He wore a navy wool suit beneath a black overcoat, scarf gray as winter smoke, shoes polished despite the slush outside. He did not look nervous. That was part of his gift. Felix could walk into a room full of people who disliked him and make it seem as though they had gathered to misunderstand a reasonable man. When the board chair, a tired woman named Celia Brandt, called the meeting to order, the room settled into a silence with many teeth. "This is an informal public hearing," Celia said. "No final legal ruling will be made here today. We are reviewing whether the pending inventory and debt recovery action concerning Harbor Light Hall should proceed, pause, or be referred for additional review." No gavel struck. No dramatic echo filled the room. Only paper shuffled. Felix rose first. He did not attack Gloria. He did not mock the choir. He did not sneer at Echo. In some ways, that made him more dangerous. "Apostle Bay is a town with a long memory," he began. "I respect that. I grew up here. My father worked the boatyards when boatyards still fed families. I know what Harbor Light Hall meant to people. My mother ate there after my father's hours were cut. I do not stand here ignorant of its history." That surprised the room enough to soften it for half a breath. Felix used the opening. "But history is not a budget. Sentiment is not a maintenance plan. We have young people leaving because there are no jobs beyond seasonal labor. We have lakefront property deteriorating while neighboring towns build winter tourism economies. We have buildings that cost more to heat than they generate in use. Harbor Light Hall may be beloved, but love does not replace a roof, pay insurance, or satisfy debt." Russell watched the faces in the room. Felix was not entirely wrong. That was the hard part. A simple villain would have been easier. A man twirling greed like a black cape could be booed, defeated, and forgotten. Felix spoke with the pain of someone who had once been poor and had sworn never to let the town's softness drag him back there. His mistake was not that he wanted Apostle Bay to survive. His mistake was believing survival required selling the places where wounded people learned to remain human. Felix continued. The proposed resort development would bring tax revenue, service jobs, infrastructure upgrades, and national attention. Harbor Light Hall can be commemorated, its photographs preserved, its name incorporated into the development. But we cannot allow nostalgia to hold an entire shoreline hostage. Warren leaned toward Denise and whispered, "If he names a cocktail after the soup, I'm haunting him." Denise elbowed him, but not hard. Then Marta stood. She needed both hands to lift her folder. For a moment, Russell thought she might sit down again. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened once more. "My name is Marta Keene," she said. "I kept part-time books for Harbor Light Cultural Trust." Her voice shook, but the microphone caught it. Russell had adjusted the gain himself. Marta laid out the documents slowly. She did not dramatize. She did not accuse beyond what the paper could bear. She identified the original repair loan, then the restructuring, then the consulting fee, then the deferred donor pledges that had not been properly reflected in the operational reports. When her hand trembled over one page, Elliot moved it gently into place. He spoke after her, spare and precise. "I was treasurer when the first roof loan was signed," Elliot said. "I left town after discrepancies appeared and after my judgment was publicly questioned. Leaving was my failure. The discrepancies were not my invention." The room held that sentence carefully. Laurel stepped forward next when Celia invited procedural comment. She did not speak like a crusader. She spoke like someone laying boards across thin ice. "There is enough documentation here to justify pausing any inventory or recovery action until an independent review determines whether the trust's financial position was accurately represented," she said. "There may be conflict of interest concerns related to consulting payments and parties connected to the proposed development. I'm not making a legal determination. I'm saying that proceeding today would be premature and likely contested." Felix remained still. Only one finger tapped once against his folder. Terrence spoke after Laurel unexpectedly. "I'm not here about finance," she said. "I'm here because of the dog." Several heads turned toward Echo, who lay in the center aisle with her front paws crossed, solemn as a carved guardian. Taryn looked uncomfortable with the attention, but continued. "Echo is not evidence. She is not a symbol anyone owns. She is a living animal who returned again and again to Harbor Light Hall because at some point it was the safest place she knew. That matters. Not legally, maybe, but it says something about the kind of place the hall was." Felix's mouth tightened. Taryn's voice sharpened. "A community is not only what it builds for visitors, it is also what its most frightened creatures trust enough to return to." No one spoke for a moment. Then Amos Bell opened his notebook. He did not stand at first. He simply looked down at the pages as if asking permission from the names inside. "There are people in this book who came to Harbor Light Hall for supper," he said. Some are gone, some are here. Some would be embarrassed if I read their names, so I will be kind and only embarrass a few. A soft murmur moved through the room. Henry Pike, Amos read. Warren's jaw worked, but he did not interrupt. 3 winters after the boatyard closed. Sat by the radiator, always said the soup needed pepper. It did not. A few people smiled. Lydia Cross, widow, ate every Thursday for 4 months and paid us back in knitted mittens no one asked for, but everyone wore. Deputy Laurel Voss, first winter in town, back row, coat on, accepted pie on the 3rd offer. Laurel stared at the wall. Amos turned a page. Gloria Hensley came to sing, stayed to wash bowls when the dishwasher broke. Gloria lowered her eyes. Marin Dane, Amos said. Russell stopped breathing. The room did not vanish. That was the miracle and the cruelty of it. It stayed exactly where it was. Fluorescent lights, snow at the windows, Felix near the front, Echo in the aisle, Amos holding a notebook. She came to help with harmony, Amos continued gently. Told me once a room could be hungry even after everyone had eaten. Russell looked down at the soundboard. His hand was on one of the sliders. For years, Marin's name had lived in him like a locked room. Spoken by others, it became unbearable and strangely lighter, as if the lock had rusted but not broken. Echo lifted her head and looked back at him. Not because she understood the name, because she understood the change in the air. Gloria rose then. She did not take out the silver microphone. She did not perform. She stood with empty hands and an old woman's brave posture. My voice is not what it was, she said. That is not a tragedy. A tragedy is believing that when something weakens, it no longer has value. Felix looked at her, and for the first time, Russell saw irritation give way to something older. Recognition, maybe, or memory. Gloria continued. Harbor Light Hall was never profitable in the way Mr. Stroud means. Neither is a porch light. Neither is a hand on someone's shoulder at the right moment. But people found their way by it. She turned slightly. I won't sing to manipulate this room. I am too old and too tired to weaponize a melody. But I will ask something. She faced the crowd. If you remember the old winter round, sing it with me, badly if necessary. Warren, that is not a challenge. Warren muttered, no promises. The first notes were fragile. Gloria began alone, her voice thin but steady enough. Amos joined, low and warm. Denise followed. Then someone in the back. Then Laurel, so quietly one might miss it. Warren came in late and too low, sounding exactly like a boat motor, refusing to start. A ripple of laughter passed through the room. The laughter did not break the song. It opened it. More voices entered. Russell stood behind the small speaker setup, one hand resting on the controls. He did not sing. He could feel the old reflex of pain waiting for him, expecting the music to turn sharp and cut. But it did not. This time, the song did not drag him backward. It moved past him, through him, like warm air finding a crack in a sealed house. Echo lay in the aisle, head on her paws, eyes fixed on Gloria. Snow drifted beyond the windows, soft as ash, bright as grace. For one brief, absurd moment, the town administration building did not feel like a place of forms and disputes. It felt like Harbor Light Hall had sent its heartbeat across the lakefront and dared the town to deny it was alive. When the song ended, no one clapped. The board did not need applause. Celia Brandt removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. One of the other board members whispered to her. Papers shifted. Felix remained standing very still. At last, Celia spoke. The board finds sufficient concern regarding the financial history of Harbor Light Cultural Trust to suspend the pending inventory and debt recovery action for 90 days. During that period, an independent financial review will be opened. The Trust will be permitted to submit a revised operating proposal for Harbor Light Hall, including safety repairs, funding sources, and community use commitments. A sound moved through the room, not cheering exactly, more like a held breath deciding to become weather. Celia lifted one hand. This is not forgiveness of debt. This is not permanent protection. This is time. Use it well. Felix closed his folder. His face did not collapse. His voice did not rise. He did not become the defeated villain some people in the room perhaps wanted. He looked instead like a man who had heard a song through a wall he had spent years building and hated that it had reached him. 90 days, he said. Celia nodded. 90 days. Felix turned toward the aisle. For a second, his gaze fell on Echo. The shepherd watched him without hatred. That seemed to trouble him more than anger would have. As Felix passed Russell, he paused. You may find, Felix said quietly, that saving a room is easier than sustaining one. Russell looked toward Gloria, Marta, Elliot, Amos, Taryn, Laurel, Warren, Denise, and the others who had come with papers, memories, and winter coats. Then he looked back at Felix. I know, he said. Felix seemed almost disappointed by the answer. Then he left. After the doors closed behind him, the room loosened. People stood, chairs scraped. Marta sat down hard and laughed once into her hands. Elliot sharpened his pencil with a tiny pocket knife, though no pencil in the world needed sharpening that badly. Gloria pressed her scarf to her mouth. Russell began coiling the audio cable. Laurel came over and stood beside him. 90 days isn't much, she said. No. You ever build anything in 90 days? Russell looked out the window toward the frozen lake. Snow kept falling, patient and bright. I've built shelters in worse conditions. Laurel nodded. This one has more paperwork. That may be worse. For the first time all day she smiled. Echo rose and came to Russell's side, leaning her shoulder against his leg. He rested one hand briefly on her head. 90 days was not victory, it was not safety, it was not redemption tied with a ribbon and set under a warm lamp. But for a man who had survived nights where morning seemed like a rumor, 90 days was a horizon, a line on the map, a chance to build a perimeter around something fragile before the next storm came. Russell looked at the people still gathered in the hearing room. They were not soldiers. They were not a unit. They were a town with bad knees, old songs, weak coffee, missing ledgers, and one wounded dog who had somehow reminded them where the door was. It would have to be enough, for now enough was a miracle with its sleeves rolled up. 90 days did not save Harbor Light Hall. People did. They came in work boots, wool coats, paint-stained gloves, old trucks, bad knees, stubborn moods, and all the ordinary forms of grace that never looked impressive on paper. The town board had given Harbor Light Hall time, but time alone was only an empty bowl. Someone still had to fill it. So they began. No one tried to turn the old hall into a museum. Gloria refused that first. If I see one velvet rope, she announced, standing in the middle of the room with a broom in hand, I will personally trip over it and sue everyone for emotional damage. Warren Pike, who was repairing a chair leg near the stage, grunted. You'd trip over it for free. I would, Gloria said, but I enjoy options. The hall became Harbor Light Winter Arts and Supper Room, a name too long for the sign and too meaningful for anyone to shorten. It was no longer only a choir room, no longer only a soup kitchen, no longer only a refuge for old memories. It became a living place, part community supper room, part winter art space, part rehearsal hall, part quiet shelter for adults who had no easy answer when asked where they belonged. Marta Keene took over the new books with the grim devotion of a woman determined never again to let numbers become fog. She hung a clear plastic display case beside the front door. Every week she posted income, expenses, donations, repair costs, and supper funds in neat columns. At first, people found it strange to see money treated so plainly in a place of songs and soup. Then they began to trust it. Elliot Crane stayed longer than he claimed he would. He said he was only helping establish an audit process. Then he said he was only training Marta on old ledger reconciliation. Then he said the pencil sharpener in the office was inferior and someone had to supervise standards. By the time the second month passed, he had his own chair near the window and a hook by the door for his flat cap. Taryn Wade started a monthly pet care corner in the side room, offering basic checkups for animals belonging to seniors, dock workers, and anyone too proud to admit a vet bill could ruin a week. She complained the hall's lighting was terrible for examining ears, then brought her own lamp and never mentioned leaving. Reverend Amos Bell took charge of Thursday soup suppers. Denise Malloy sewed curtains from donated fabric and scolded anyone who called them nice enough. Warren fixed tables, chairs, a loose stair rail, and one cabinet door he claimed had been insulting carpentry as a profession. Deputy Laurel Voss helped with permits, exit signs, capacity limits, and fire inspection requirements. She also made sure no one referred to these things as boring paperwork in her presence. Boring paperwork, she said, is what keeps emotional people from accidentally burning down meaningful buildings. Russell Dane said little through all of it. He worked. That was the language he trusted first. He replaced old wiring behind the stage. He repaired speakers that had survived through stubbornness alone. He reinforced the back wall where moisture had crept in. He hauled planks from the marina, salvaged from an old dock section removed before the ice set hard. The wood was scarred, weather-darkened, and still smelled faintly of lake water. From it, he built a small sound room behind the stage. Not large, not impressive. Just enough space for a compact board, clean cable runs, a stool, shelves for microphones, and a narrow window looking out toward the stage. He sanded the reclaimed planks himself, leaving some of the old marks visible. Nail scars, rope burns, the dark curve where lake water had lived inside the grain. Gloria came to inspect it before the glass went in. "Looks like a confession booth for men who apologize to amplifiers," she said. Russell tightened a bracket. "That's a limited but underserved population." She smiled, then grew quiet. On a small shelf near the corner, Russell had placed a framed photograph of Marin. Not the bright stage photo from the wall, a smaller one. Marin sitting on the marina steps in her blue scarf, wind in her hair, looking away from the camera as if someone had just called her name. Gloria touched the edge of the frame with 2 fingers. "You ready for her to be here?" she asked. Russell kept his eyes on the bracket. "No." Gloria nodded. Then Russell added, "But I'm done keeping her out." That was enough. The sound room changed him, though not in ways anyone would put into a speech. He did not become cheerful. He did not suddenly love crowds. He still left conversations before they became too soft. He still woke some nights with old grief sitting on his chest like winter weight. But now, when memory came, he had somewhere to put his hands. A knob to turn, a cable to coil, a voice to steady, a room to keep warm. Echo changed too. The dog who had once slept half-starved on the porch grew stronger under Taryn's care and Russell's quiet routine. Her coat deepened into a rich black saddle over warm tan legs and chest. Her ribs no longer showed, though the old scars remained beneath the fur. The torn tip of her left ear never healed straight, and the pale ring around her neck never fully disappeared. Russell adopted her officially on a Tuesday morning in February. The clerk at the county office asked for the dog's color. "Black and tan," Russell said. The clerk asked for identifying marks. Russell paused. "Torn left ear, scar on right foreleg. Thinks she owns a public building." The clerk looked up. Russell did not smile. The clerk wrote, "Distinctive earmarking." Echo received a new leather collar, soft brown, with a small brass tag engraved with her name on one side and the painted lantern of Harbor Light on the other. Russell expected her to dislike it. Instead, she stood very still while he fastened it, then leaned her head briefly against his chest. He did not make a large thing of it, neither did she. That was why it mattered. Echo kept her habits. On snowy evenings, she still lay on the front porch, as if guarding the door from invisible cold. During rehearsals, she slept near the piano. During suppers, she made slow rounds between tables, accepting careful pats from people she had approved over time. Warren called her the fluffy customs officer. Denise called her Her Grace. Gloria called her our unpaid director of emotional accuracy. Russell understood her differently. Echo was not protecting a building. She was protecting a promise. The promise that no one would vanish into winter without someone noticing the empty chair. By the end of the 90 days, Harbor Light had submitted its revised plan. Supper nights twice a week, winter choir gatherings, open mic evenings for local adults, small art workshops, transparent financial reporting, safety upgrades, and a pet care clinic once a month. The independent financial review had not finished everything, but it had found enough irregularities to keep Felix from regaining easy control. Felix Stroud did not apologize, not publicly. He did not stand in the hall with wet eyes and ask forgiveness. Life was rarely that tidy, and Russell distrusted tidy endings. Felix stayed away through most of March. Then, one morning, Marta found an envelope in the mail slot addressed to the supper fund. Inside was a cashier's check. No note, no signature. Marta stared at it for a long time before carrying it to Russell in the sound room. "You know who it's from," she said. Russell looked at the amount, then at the blank envelope. "Yes." "Should we return it?" "Is the money clean?" "As far as I can tell." "Then feed people with it." Marta folded her arms. "That simple?" "No." He handed the check back. "But soup is better than pride." Marta almost smiled. "Gloria will accuse you of wisdom if you're not careful." "Don't tell her." They told no one. There was no applause for Felix, no announcement, no redemption ribbon tied around a hard man's name. But on the next Thursday, more bowls were filled. That was enough light to pass through the crack. The reopening night came under bright falling snow. Not a grand gala. Gloria forbade that word. It was a supper, a song night, a stubborn act of staying. The hall glowed from within. Warm yellow light spilled onto the boardwalk and turned the snowflakes gold as they drifted past the windows. Inside, every table was full. Dock workers sat beside retirees, widows beside mechanics, veterans beside laundromat customers. People who had once eaten alone now reached for bread baskets and coffee pots without asking. Gloria stood at the microphone, wearing a dark velvet jacket over her cardigan and a silver scarf that caught the stage light. Her voice would never be what it had been. Everyone knew. No one cared. Russell sat behind the glass of the new sound room, one hand resting near the faders. The room smelled of clean wood, warm electronics, and faintly of lake wind trapped in old boards. Marin's photograph watched from the shelf, not as a wound now, but as a witness. Echo lay beside the stage, eyes half closed, her brass tag resting against her chest. Gloria looked toward Russell. He adjusted the microphone slightly and nodded. She began. The first note trembled, then found the room. Amos joined. Denise followed. Warren entered late and in a key that seemed to have wandered in from another county. Gloria stopped singing just long enough to say, "Warren, that note owes me an apology." The room broke into laughter. Then they continued. The sound was not perfect. It was better than perfect. It was human. Old voices, rough voices, shy voices, voices that had forgotten how to trust air. They rose together beneath the rafters, over bowls and tables and patched floorboards, through curtains Denise had sewn and speakers Russell had rebuilt, past the old photographs and the new financial notice board by the door. Russell listened. For the first time in years, music did not feel like betrayal. It did not drag Marin away from him, nor did it pretend to bring her back. It simply made space for her, for Gloria, for Echo, for all of them. Past and present sitting in the same warm room, not healed into perfection, but allowed to belong together. Outside, Apostle Bay lay under snow. The frozen lake held the moonlight. The marina slept. The old hall shone at the edge of the water like a lantern set out for late travelers. Russell looked through the glass at Echo, at Gloria, at the room full of people singing badly and bravely. Then he looked at Marin's photograph. "I stayed," he said quietly. No one heard him. Maybe that was right. Some vows did not need witnesses. On stage, Gloria lifted one hand, guiding the imperfect choir through the final line. Echo opened her eyes, watching as if guarding a small temple, built not of stone, but of second chances. And outside, the snow kept falling, not like a sheet drawn over what had died, but like white chalk across a new page, waiting for the next song to be written. Sometimes healing does not begin with a grand miracle. Sometimes it begins with a door left open, a bowl of soup shared, a song sung imperfectly, or a wounded dog reminding a quiet man that some places, and some hearts, are still worth saving. Harbor Light Hall teaches us this. We do not have to become who we were before the loss. We only need enough courage to let love make room for what comes next. Maybe there is someone in your life who needs to be remembered, invited in, or simply given a warm place to rest. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe for more stories of hope, loyalty, and second chances. May peace find your home tonight, and may God give you the grace to notice the small lights still shining in the snow.